again, everybody. It is time once again for the Silver Bullets podcast. I am Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, last week we did our Big Ten West preview. Of course, we are back this week to do our Big Ten East preview. And I am going to hold your feet to the fire at the end of the season when your pick for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights proves to be erroneous.
Yeah, well, it's kind of that's one of those surprise teams. So, yeah, I mean, I certainly would be deserving of such a horrible fate to have my feet held to the fire if I inaccurately predict how Rutgers does in 2021.
Yeah, well, I think that if you predict them to win the East, probably there's a lot of things that have gone wrong. And some interesting notes since we last spoke. It's been clarified that vaccinations, no vaccinations, whatever the reason, if a team doesn't have the ability to field a full squad to play a game in the Big Ten this year, it is a forfeit. There will be no rescheduled games.
And I think, in all fairness, when you talk about putting feet to the fire, this is exactly, okay, like you're putting the pressure squarely and solely on the respective universities and athletic departments to make sure that they do everything possible to get as fully vaccinated. If it's within their means, and I don't want to go on a political bent here, but the Pfizer vaccine as of today has been approved by the FDA. I mean, we're kind of running out of excuses, that people have been throwing around. So let's get all vaccinated and let's get to some college football.
All right. Well, first of all, it's not political. There's nothing political about science. It's just science. But secondly, with the way things have been going, even vaccinations are not foolproof for breakthrough cases, and we all apparently need boosters and all of that good stuff. So the main thing is just to keep being safe, wearing masks indoors and that kind of stuff. So as you are aware, I'm a big music fan, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of bands right now that are seeing cases in their, either within the band or within the band's crew, and having to cancel shows even though people are vaccinated. So be safe, folks. It's up to us to take care of each other, and that's all I'll say, and I'll leave it at that. Chip, the quarterback has been named since you and I last spoke, and of course we pretty much all figured it would be C.J. Stroud, and hey, what a surprise, it's C.J. Stroud.
And congratulations to him for it sounds the way that Coach Day has been referring to this as an opportunity. This is not and that's not, I don't think that phrase is being thrown around as, okay, you need to be looking over your shoulder. I think, if anything, C.J. Stroud, obviously in practice, in preparation, both on and off the field, I think demonstrated to the coaching staff, and especially Ryan Day, that he was the right person to be named the starter. We've talked about it, and we'll talk about it in much greater detail next week when we preview the Minnesota game. I think if anything, the unsolicited advice that I would give to C.J. Stroud would be to truly take advantage of the talent and the personnel around him. Like, don't try to feel like you need to be playing at a superhuman level. I think by taking advantage of the offensive line, giving you protection, trusting the reads, if your wide receivers open, don't feel like, oh, you have to make your third read, kind of a thing. Like let's play smart. And I think everything will take care of itself.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about C.J. Stroud, how he's looked in practice, how his receivers have looked in practice. We've heard a lot of things, and of course, if you are a member at Buckeye Scoop, and you can go on the Ask the Insiders board, and you can see for yourself what those reports are from inside practice. So We encourage you to do that. This is a great time of year to sign up if you have not yet done so, because you're going to get a lot of info, a lot of good info there. And info is good. Information, what do they say? Knowledge is key.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. Yeah, that's it. So go get yourself some power. It's not that expensive.
Precisely. Exactly.
Some unfortunate news to pass along is we've heard, or of course we've been told that Rowan McCullough is no longer playing football because of medical issues. So the younger brother of former long snapper Liam McCullough, a long snapper himself, Rowan will not. It doesn't look like he'll be able to follow in his brother's footsteps there and become a Heisman candidate, a long snapper for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Again, as you cited, the medical issues are what's causing this, and I know it's got to be very disappointing to Rowan McCullough and his family, but you also want to make sure that any individual, regardless of what position they play on the field, that they are following medical advice. So it sounds like that's what Rowan's doing, and we wish him nothing but the best as he moves forward in his academic pursuits at Ohio State.
Yeah, following expert medical advice, always a good idea, Chip. I think is what we've determined so far on this show.
Yeah, I listen to my doctors. Even when they tell me things that I don't necessarily want to hear, I listen to them.
Good man, Chip. Good man. All right, we got some black stripes coming off again this week since you and I spoke. I think Donovan Jackson, Jordan Hancock, Jansen Dunn. Is that everybody since last week?
I'm fairly certain. I think you've got them all. Obviously, when you're talking about freshmen, like the latter two that you mentioned there with Hancock and Dunn playing in the secondary, the possibility of I don't want to say early playing time, but maybe being contributors on special teams, things of that nature. It seems likely. I just know that considering you and I both agree that the secondary was our biggest concern, position group wise, going into 2021. Maybe we'll see either of those or both of those young men playing in game time conditions in the secondary. Turning towards Donovan Jackson, what I'm really excited about is when you talk about the insiders and things like that. Mr. Kirk Barton, I mean, you're talking about an All-American, and he knows the goods when he sees the goods, and he is raving about Donovan Jackson's potential. Now, that offensive line, again, that's a position of strength, and that's not meant to imply that Donovan Jackson won't see any playing time. But I'm kind of intrigued to see, all right, what kind of playing time he gets, because that black stripe is taken off, means that regardless of whether we're talking, offensive line, defensive back, whatever, that the players believe that this guy is ready to help and participate and help us win. And so maybe we'll get to see Donovan Jackson see what has Kirk Barton and all the other insiders all excited about.
Yeah, 5-star offensive lineman. Donovan Jackson is a guy who we're hearing a lot about. And when you have an offensive line as solid as Ohio State's and with as much depth as Ohio State's, it's never a bad thing to see these young guys stepping right up and getting in the mix and competing. And I think in lopsided games, we may see Donovan Jackson at least 4 times this season if there are enough lopsided games to get him in there so he can get some game action and still have the ability to redshirt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to sound selfish, because it's when it comes to any of these players, obviously, if they can help Ohio State win, then they should play. I guess I'm always of the mindset that if you can save a year of eligibility, because let's face it, I mean, like, I know we're talking about Donovan Jackson. Unfortunately, Tyler Friday, he is, been dealing with some injury issues that more than likely is going to knock him out for the entire year. So it's like, okay, like the opportunity to take this 2021 season as a redshirt year and come back, finish strong, going back towards Donovan Jackson. It's like, as you said, it's a position of strength. Maybe 4 games. I would rather not waste the year of eligibility unless, he's truly going to get an opportunity to play and contribute on a much greater basis.
Yeah, I think it's probably what the coaching staff has in mind. They're hoping that they can keep everybody healthy and they won't need to use him any more than that. Get him some experience, get him excited for next year, and of course, there's going to be some turnover on that line through guys using up their eligibility. So it's exciting to see Donovan Jackson already becoming officially a Buckeye, getting that stripe removed. Chip, we also got to hear who the captains will be. I think that was named on Friday. We've got 6 captains: Thayer Munford, Chris Olave, Zach Harrison, Haskell Garrett, Taraja Mitchell, and Cameron Babb. Any surprises, any surprise omissions there amongst these captains for you?
Well, I would say it's a surprise, but I mean this in the most positive manner that I can possibly state, and that is Cameron Babb. Simply because, we're talking about injuries and, misfortune, and Cameron Babb has certainly had more than enough of that since he's been in Columbus. And the fact that he hasn't played, with all just simply and exclusively due to injuries, the simple fact that he hasn't played and he has made that much of a positive impact with regard to leadership within his position group, within the program, to garner enough votes and support to be named one of the captains, I think that just speaks volumes about the character and quality of Cameron Babb. So I'm truly excited for him.
It's very reminiscent of C.J. Saunders when he was picked.
It is. So it's like, I know that we were hoping that, maybe he'll get an opportunity to play. We don't know. I mean, we only wish the nothing but the best for him. But the mere fact that no matter how Cameron Babb's career turns out with regard to playing time, the fact that he was voted a captain just speaks volumes about, like I said, I think the kind of individual he is.
Yeah. So that took place on Friday, as did the Black Stripe announcements, I believe. Then we got the C.J. Stroud announcement on Saturday that he'll be the starter. And I think that just about brings us up to what I wanted to talk about before our Big Ten East preview. Oh, there are 4 Buckeyes named to AP preseason All-American teams: Chris Olave and Haskell Garrett on the first team, and Garrett Wilson and Thayer Munford on the second team. It's hard to believe Thayer Munford's on the second team, but it is what it is.
And the mere fact that Thayer Munford, I know that we're talking about how the fact that he's on the second team. He, again, I think it speaks to the kind of character that Thayer Munford is. I mean, we have been hearing more and more about the offensive line being adjusted so that they can get who they consider their 5 best on the field. Thayer Munford was a projected NFL draft choice at left tackle, but he very unselfishly said, hey, if I move inside to guard, and that will allow DeJuan Jones to get on the field at right tackle, and we move Nick Petit-Frere over to left tackle, I'll do it. And I'm not sure if you saw Thayer Munford with Coach Studd calling Thayer Munford's father to let him know that he was named a captain, and Coach Studd Thayer Munford's mother. Thayer Munford's mother was told that Thayer garnered more votes than anyone. So I mean, again, I just think it speaks volumes about the kind of quality young men that are in Ohio State's program. It's really exciting.
Yeah, tremendous video. If you haven't seen that on Twitter, you can find it pretty easily. Always love to see stuff like that. I think that's about it for the current Buckeyes. There was a list put out for the NFL's top 100 players that had some former Buckeyes on it. The usual suspects: Joey Bosa, Cam Hayward, Corey Linsley, Michael Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore, and Chase Young, after only 1 year in the league. I don't know his current health status, but is Nick Bosa a snub here?
I would say so. I think, when he's healthy, I would definitely say Nick Bosa is a top 100 player. But I'm sure that weighed in, in those rankings.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always tough. I mean, there's nothing that you can do about that. You just have to hope that Nick can come back and contribute again at the level that he was, because he was a fantastic player. And you never want to see a guy get hurt. Never want to see that. We don't have any update on, I'm going to butcher this name, Palea Gaoteote. Still no word from the NCAA, Chip. Have you heard anything?
No, nothing new since.
They haven't called you? The NCAA hasn't called you?
It hasn't called me. I've been waiting anxiously by the phone. But in all seriousness, I know it's got to be very frustrating for him. It's got to be. From everything that I'm reading online, I can kind of detect the frustration from the coaching staff, because this certainly does not seem like this is the kind of issue that should be taking so long. So you can only hope that the young man gets to play, in the season opener against Minnesota. I mean, that's the nice thing. This is a week 0 week. We do have college football coming this Saturday, so I'm anxious for that. But getting back to the question at hand is, I think the NCAA is certainly dragging their feet on this one.
When they do stuff like this, it makes me just think that they're going to do the wrong thing, because it takes no time at all to do the right thing. And if you're dragging it out like this unnecessarily, it just makes me think they're going to make the wrong decision here.
You're probably right, unfortunately.
And this is the kind of thing that happens with decisions at Ohio State. You don't get that year of eligibility for C.J. Saunders. I don't know what the reason is. I don't know if Gene Smith is not popular. I don't know what the deal is, but these are the things that are irksome and really give Ohio State fans that Ohio against the world mentality.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it does certainly feel as though, you brought up C.J. Saunders. That made no sense whatsoever why he was denied an extra year of eligibility. It certainly does. Let's just say it fuels the flames of controversy and conspiracy that Ohio State fans have when they, as you said, that Ohio against the world mentality.
Chip, when I sat down to record this podcast with you, I did not think that we would be invoking C.J. Saunders' name twice already.
He's having, from what I've seen, not that I because he's with Carolina, from what I've seen on Twitter, I think he's having a solid camp with the Panthers. So certainly can only hope that he makes it through. I know, because roster cuts are rapidly approaching, so you can only hope that maybe he'll make it his way onto the Panthers roster, if not, maybe on their practice squad.
So he made it further than Tim Tebow is what you're saying.
Now you're getting nasty.
I'm just saying. I'm just making an observation. I wasn't being nasty. All right, so you and I are going to dissect the Big Ten East as we did the West last week, and we can get into that and determine our predictions and where we think everybody's going to finish, and we'll get to that right after this. And we're back, Chip, and it's time for us to talk about the Big Ten East. I think that probably we can just skip right over number one, because I think both you and I will probably predict that Ohio State will finish first in the Big Ten East.
Yeah, I mean, I know I hate to cause so much suspense, but yeah, big surprise. I mean, it's definitely, Ohio State has been the team to beat in the Big Ten East. I see no reason why 2021 will be any different.
I know I joked earlier about you picking Rutgers in that spot, but I was only 50-50 on that. I thought there was only a 50% chance you would pick Rutgers.
Uh, you kind of overshot a little bit, just a little, just a tad.
I overestimated your love of the Scarlet Knights there.
My love of the Scarlet Knights was a little overestimated.
All right, so obviously, if we do want to talk a little bit here, we've talked about our positions of concern a couple weeks ago. You can go back and check that out. But this team will go as far as the quarterback will take them, I think. Are you in agreement with that?
I am. I know next week, when we have an actual game to preview, we could talk more about what we may or may not see out of CJ Stroud now that he's the starter. I know that it's going to be interesting to find out the rest of the depth chart. We have a pretty good idea in terms of who probably is going to start on the offensive line. Who's going to probably, if not start, definitely what kind of a rotation you're going to see at running back, wide receiver, etc. I agree with that statement that I think the team will go as far as CJ Stroud. It goes back to what I said earlier in this podcast, that I think it's going to be incumbent upon CJ Stroud to play within himself and not try to become kind of like, oh, I'm going to carry this team on my back, when it's completely unnecessary to do so, especially as a first-time starter.
Yeah, I think the thing that we keep hearing with regard to CJ Stroud is the word leadership. Even above, we know all these guys are talented. All these young guys, they're all very talented. They're all very highly recruited quarterbacks. And we keep hearing the word leadership from Ryan Day and the other coaches and even the other players. So I think that's when you have equal talent, when the talent is equated, as Ryan Day likes to say, when they play teams like Penn State and Michigan, then you look for other things. I think the leadership is what set C.J. Stroud apart, even beyond how he performed last year.
Very good point. I think it certainly leadership is something that he demonstrated, and he has certainly earned the confidence of the coaching staff and the players on the team. So now it's just a matter of putting it all together. And like I said, I think the first couple games, I'm not saying that Ohio State's in for rocky times per se, but I think there might be some moments where because you're playing against some decent competition, that I think will really help in the growth and maturation process for CJ Stroud.
Mm-hmm. There'll be some angst, I think, among the fan base.
There you go. Angst is the good word.
Yeah. I'm going to assume, and maybe I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to assume we might have the same pick as the runner-up in the East. And you can tell me if I'm wrong. I know that Indiana made great strides last year. I'm going to stay with Penn State in second, and I don't know if you are also sticking with Penn State.
I certainly am. For all of the challenges that Penn State had last year, I think, and again, this might be, trying to be overly optimistic. What I kind of look at it is when, for example, they lost, right from the beginning, like they lost their first 5 games, and by and large, that opener at Indiana was just kind of, I think very demoralizing, and there were also a lot of players who they had injuries. For example, like one of the biggest ones right from the beginning was Noah Cain at running back, mm-hmm. which forced them to play younger players, which isn't always a bad thing. But now those players have gained experience. So I think this team, with the addition of Mike Yurcich as offensive coordinator, I think they're going to get back to more of what James Franklin would prefer to do offensively, that they got away from after Joe Moore had left. I think that they would really, I think they're going to try and get back to something. I'm not saying the Joe Moorhead offense per se, but like something closer to that. I think Mike Yurcich, he had, a stint at Ohio State, but what brought him actually to Ohio State was coming from Oklahoma State. So I think that Big 12 wide open kind of offense, I think Penn State's going to try and get back to that. Defensively, we'll see kind of, what kind of they lost, some talent on that side of the ball, but I really do think that the schedule itself lends itself to Penn State, not necessarily getting off to a great start, but a better start, obviously, than they had last year. I think that Indiana game, October 2nd, is going to certainly be interesting to see, simply because in the minds of Penn State fans, they were robbed of a win. They will probably, for the remainder of time, argue that Michael Penix did not score that touchdown. So I think that first game, I can't wait to see against Wisconsin. They travel to Wisconsin, I think, for the first time. And I mean, it's been a long time. I want to say like 2013. So, I mean, that's a highly, I heard that. I couldn't believe it. But I mean, going to Camp Randall is never an easy thing. I think to start off the season makes it even more challenging. So I think we'll get a really quick gauge as to how good Penn State is. Even if I don't know if they'll necessarily win, but I just want to see how they do against a Wisconsin team that you and I both picked to win the Big Ten West.
Yeah, I think partly last year they were derailed by a lot of weirdness. You mentioned Noah Cain. Obviously, they didn't have Micah Parsons because he opted out. Leader on their defense. But they've also found some things that I think are going to help them going into this year. Jahan Dotson he's just a guy that will be a security blanket and help the quarterback there, because you saw what he did against Ohio State, and those were plays that he was pretty well covered.
Yeah, Jahan Dotson is certainly playing in the same division as Ohio State's wide receivers. It's very easy to potentially overlook him, but I agree with you. I think Jahan Dotson, it's also, I think, he's very much maligned, but I think this is an opportunity for Sean Clifford to kind of redeem himself at the quarterback position. I think, maybe with Mike Yurcich putting, Clifford in, better positions to succeed. Like you said, I think there were a lot of extenuating factors. The opt out of Micah Parsons, I think, certainly played a part. I think, like everyone else, there were a lot of issues that were, injuries and COVID and whatnot that I think played a part in it. I just think Penn State will bounce back strongly. And again, like their schedule is challenging, but like I said, I don't think it's anything that will keep them from winning that second place spot in the Big Ten East.
Yeah, I think that the potential landmine for them is that they've got that schedule where they're going to Wisconsin, they go to Iowa. That's another difficult road game in the Big Ten. Those are, obviously not within the division, but they can have an effect on where you end up at the end of the year. Their rivalry game against Maryland is on the road. Not sure if that will trip them up, but it is on the road. They do have Michigan at home. They play at Michigan State to end the season. And they have two really, really easy non-conference games and one pretty difficult one against Auburn. So Penn State, if they're going to trip up and slip from that second spot, or slip from challenging Ohio State, it's probably due to the schedule. I think the schedule is not probably one that they are. I think it's something that if they can get through the schedule, it will serve them well. In whatever bowl game, or even potentially sneaking into the college football playoff. I think that would serve them well. But I think that's a difficult schedule for them, and if there is a chance for them to slip up, it's because the schedule makers sent them on the road to the two of the tougher Western Division teams, and of course at Ohio State is always a challenge for them as well. So we'll see how it goes. Chip, here's where things get interesting. Give me your number 3 team in the East.
I'm going to go with Indiana, simply because I think that they're going to take a step back, but not a substantial step back. I think that Tom Allen has kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of made Indiana into that scrappy, tough team that Ohio State fans, I don't want to say grew to hate, that might be too strong, but grew accustomed to for a lot of the Urban Meyer era when Mark D'Antonio and Michigan State. You know what I mean? Like, just that they were just they were not very flashy. They were just very fundamentally sound. And I just think, I mean, I mentioned him earlier. I think Michael Penix is, you talk about how far, the success of Ohio State with C.J. Stroud. I think Michael Penix is certainly falls into that same kind of categorization. He is often had injuries. I know that they feel comfortable with Jack Tuttle as the backup quarterback, but let's face it, I think Michael Penix is certainly the person that they are relying on. They also have a very good wide receiver in Ty Freifogel, who abused the Ohio State secondary last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about the schedule. That's what I'm really excited about. Next week when we start looking forward to like the week 1 slate of games. Obviously, I'm very excited about Ohio State, Minnesota, but we were just talking about Penn State going on the road to Wisconsin. Indiana goes on the road to Iowa. So that's an example of when you look at Indiana's schedule. I mean, they have some tough ones. I mean, I just mentioned the opener at Iowa, as you said. They do go to Penn State. They get Cincinnati in the middle of September, and that's not going to be an easy one. So I think Indiana will take a small step back, but I feel comfortable putting them at number 3 in the Big Ten East.
All right. Well, maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. Maybe I'm just still traumatized from the 90s, but I have Michigan in 3rd in the East, and partly because of that Indiana schedule. I mean, you look at their schedule, and they start with Iowa on the road. They do have a tough Cincinnati non-conference game at home. Very short trip for Cincinnati, obviously. They go to Penn State against a team that, as you mentioned, probably not going to be backing down from Indiana this year. You're going to want to prove that last year was a fluke and maybe not an accurate play call even after the review. So you got Indiana at Penn State. They do play Ohio State at home, and they do play Michigan State at home. They go to Michigan, and I think maybe that's the reason. Another reason I think that this could be Michigan's year to jump back up over Indiana, and Indiana also has to play Minnesota, and then they have their rivalry game on the road at Purdue. So I think the schedule for me is the difference maker. I think Michigan has a lot to prove. I think we're going to see Michigan's biggest swing in years, because this is it for Jim Harbaugh. This is it. You're not getting any more mulligans. You're going to have to get it done. You've already taken your pay cut, so you can't do that again. And this is an opportunity for him to get things turned back in the right direction, to at least try to buy himself another year. That Indiana game at home will help. Doesn't help that he goes to Penn State. He does have Ohio State at home. Goes to Wisconsin, goes to Nebraska. Nebraska shouldn't be a problem for a team with Michigan's talent, but you never know. And they do play Washington as well in the non-conference schedule. But I think that Michigan's schedule sets up fairly nicely for them as opposed to how Indiana's schedule sets up. So I think Michigan and then Indiana for me. Do you have Michigan after Indiana, or are you going Maryland next?
No, I'm going to go with Michigan. I think this is where you and I, like, again, we look at the same schedules, but from a different perspective. Like I look at Michigan's schedule and I see this being just fraught with peril. Um, Case in point being the very first game against Western Michigan. I'm not suggesting that the Wolverines will lose that game, but I will say that I think that we were talking earlier about having some angst. I think this is the kind of, depending on how the Wolverines come out against Western Michigan, which isn't that bad of a MAC team. I mean, they're really not that bad. I think that might be the recipe for a lot of angst in Ann Arbor. I don't see the Wolverines doing well against Washington. We we both know that Rutgers truly, I mean, played toe to toe, and you know, for like maybe a few different bounces of the ball could have won that game last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see them even
Well, didn't Rutgers
they
miss a field goal in that game in overtime? Maybe.
that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like I think it's like, some unfortunate, like that was, the kind of thing where it's like, okay, prior to COVID, 2020, I was like, okay, well, I mean, just automatically chalk that up as a W for Michigan, and I know we'll talk about Rutgers later on in the podcast, but the mere fact that Rutgers played them as you know, like pretty much toe to toe, throughout that entire game. I think that spoke volumes. The mere fact that, I mean, speaking about getting back to the Wolverine schedule, I mean, the last 2 years, Wisconsin has just completely manhandled them, and I certainly don't see that changing in 2021. I think going to Nebraska could be interesting. Northwestern's always a tough one. Michigan State beat them, and I mean that I think spoke volumes about the kind of program that is being built in East Lansing and kind of the challenges that Harbaugh has. I think Indiana and Penn State can beat them, and Maryland. That could be, kind of, that might be the death knell for Jim Harbaugh. I mean, so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm putting them at fourth, but I truly contemplated. I'm not exaggerating. I truly contemplated thinking, like the talent on hand at Maryland is not as highly touted as Michigan's, but I have a feeling that, when it comes to the wide receivers on Maryland, that I think it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Maryland could upset the Wolverines, considering that it is at home. So yeah, I think Michigan, I mean, they're going to be transitioning to a 3-4. They don't really have the personnel for it. Cade McNamara at quarterback. I mean, I think that it's obvious that they want J.J. McCarthy to eventually win that job, but right now he's not ready. I think by and large, the Wolverines, I think this could be a really challenging year. I put them in fourth, but there was a lot of trepidation on my part.
All right. Well, maybe I'm crazy for putting them third, but there's a lot of unknowns, as you mentioned. I don't think their schedule is that bad, and I don't foresee. I think Rutgers had their shot, and they didn't shoot they didn't take their shot. They had it, they didn't get it done. So I think might be another long time before they are able to get that close again, because they're Rutgers. But we don't know about Cade McNamara. He's a complete wild card. We don't know how the team's defense will fare now that the defense is now under Mike McDonald. John Harbaugh sent some of his cronies to go help his brother save his job, and that was one of them. Don Brown is out, and we'll see how that goes for their defense. I mean, they have talent. I don't know that they have depth, but if they can stay healthy and if they can adapt to what their coaching staff wants them to do, I mean, they have the talent to get things done. I just don't know. There's just a lot of question marks. But like I said, maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit and giving them credit where maybe I shouldn't. But I've got them third, which isn't incredibly high. And but I think you could certainly make a case for Indiana, as you eloquently did. Aiden Hutchinson will be, another will probably have another outstanding year, and we'll see what happens with the offense and see if they get any quarterback play this year, because that's really, I mean, that's half the battle with college football. Is if you have good quarterback play, you can overcome a lot of shortcomings. So this is a team that
Yep.
didn't score a lot of points last year. If they turn the corner and score more points, they have enough talent on defense that they can get some things done. But yeah, I think they're going to have some struggles along the way. Wisconsin certainly. I think Washington will be a bit of a struggle, but I don't think that matters so much, because I don't think that they're aiming for the college football playoff so much as they're just trying to get back to some level of respectability in the Big Ten East. So that game's not going to haunt them in that way. At Nebraska is not a big deal. At Maryland will be probably that's going to be the determining factor, I think, on whether or not they can get things done. And again, Indiana, there's question marks for me on them from their schedule. So we'll see how it goes, and we will move on to, let's see, where are we at now? We've gone through our top four. We both have Michigan State, Maryland, and Rutgers on the board. It sounded like from your last explanation that you've got Maryland next.
I do. Maryland, they, again, you want to talk about, some up and downs last year, in terms of, just like everyone else in the Big Ten, with the COVID issues. I mean, the Ohio State game was canceled due to it. Like they were blown out in last year by Northwestern, and then they came back and beat Minnesota in overtime. And then they legitimately, it wasn't a fluke. They legitimately beat Penn State on the road, which kind of, again, it's like they've got a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. Taulia Tagovailoa at quarterback. I think you're talking about the necessity and the importance of good quarterback play.
Mm-hmm. Good quarterback can take you a long way.
Yeah, I think he certainly has a lot of the intangibles and tools that could help spring Maryland forward. It'll be interesting to see, because when I look at their schedule, that West Virginia game, I mean, it's at home, so you never know. That's the kind of thing. Like I remember years ago, Maryland beating Texas, like back to back, kind of, and it was like, was that a fluke kind of a thing, like that they were able to do that. So beating West Virginia, I think, could get them off to a really good start, because when you look at the fact they play Howard, they go to Illinois, and they play Kent State, they could be 4-0 at the end of September. So now you've got some positive momentum, positive thinking. And again, I'm not necessarily a big Mike Locksley fan, but I do want to give credit where credit is due. I think the recruiting is certainly improved under his direction. So it's entirely possible they could spring up, past Michigan. I'm giving Michigan the benefit of the doubt, but I do have them fourth. Excuse me, fifth.
Yeah. All right. Well, certainly Taulia Tagovailoa was a breath of fresh air for that team. They don't have Jake Funk anymore. And you mentioned their good start. Well, then comes a little bit of a murderer's row for them. The Terrapins will host Iowa, then go to Ohio State, go to Minnesota, and then host Indiana and Penn State. That's a really tough part of the schedule for Maryland to navigate. And for that reason, I have Michigan State in the 5 spot.
Interesting.
I believe that there's something about the guy on the sideline. I did not expect Michigan State to do anything last year. And Michigan State had some surprising wins, and they had no reason, as late as they changed coaches, to get anything accomplished last year. So I think when you look at what they did last year, I mean, that spoke about a team that, is behind their coach and is, perhaps on the road to turning around. I think they have a lot of holes, but I think Michigan State has some opportunities here. They also do have a tough schedule, especially at the beginning of the season too. Though they go to Northwestern in week 1. They go to the University of Miami in Florida in week 3. They play a very good Youngstown State team, not a Division I team, and they will have to go to Indiana. But I think they it sets up pretty nicely in the West because they also they play at Purdue as well. So at Purdue, they play Penn State at home. They do have to go to Ohio State. They have Maryland at home. So again, I just think that that's a heck of a gauntlet Maryland needs to run. So I think that pushes, for me, it pushes Michigan State just slightly ahead of Maryland. Does that make sense? Am I crazy?
No, I didn't say you're crazy,
Well, I
and it
could be.
makes it. Well, I like the optimism about because I am a Mel Tucker fan.
Yeah.
I didn't like the way he left Colorado, the manner in which he did, but I understand why he did, considering his background in terms of he's from the Midwest. This is an opportunity for him to come back to a program that that he believes could be a threat within the Big Ten. So I think Mel Tucker is definitely one of those kind of guys that, like you said, like I think he certainly has the program going in the right direction. Where you and I diverge is I think he's building something. I just don't think he has them there yet. I mean, like he's certainly taking advantage of the transfer portal, because that roster is so depleted. I think, it's just like, okay, you're kind of, like trying to put Band-Aids on position areas, and just like try and like with smoke and mirrors, like let's get something. And I think he's, like the recruiting is certainly, that's a slowly but surely, you're trying to reestablish good relationships with the coaching staffs throughout the Midwest. That because that's basically the lifeblood of any program. But Michigan State had really kind of fallen way behind in the latter years of Mark D'Antonio's tenure. Getting back to the transfer portal and using some of the terms that you were describing about quarterback play, that's where I think that could be an issue, because nothing against Anthony Russo, he has come in as a graduate transfer at quarterback, and he's competing for the job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that he or Peyton Thorne have been. I'm not. Maybe I missed it. I don't believe I've seen anything about who's been named the starter, because I know that was kind of an area like during spring football that they were kind of emphasizing, like, oh, this battle's going to go on into the fall camp. I think Michigan State is going to be much better in their second year, as you said, because they really didn't have a spring. Mel Tucker got there so late. I mean, like everything COVID related, but I just don't see them, as high as you do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think that's very high, but I'm putting Mel Tucker ahead of Mike Loxley, even though Mike Loxley's the one that's got the quarterback. I do think we'll see a little more consistency out of Ricky White, but we will have to see who wins that quarterback battle. And it can't be as bad quarterback wise as it was last year, though, for Michigan State. That was some bad quarterback play.
It was some bad quarterback play. It was just some bad play all around. I mean, like when Michigan State, like when they lost the season opener, it was kind of okay. That makes sense because as you and I both agree, Mel Tucker didn't really have a spring, and and then when they went on the road the next week and beat the Wolverines, you're thinking, okay, either they're much better or Michigan is really bad. And I think it was more that Michigan was really bad. And then, like getting back to, okay, when they were bad, they were bad. I mean, like Iowa thumped them. They got, beat soundly by Indiana, Ohio State. I think by and large, I think they are improving. I just don't see them making, like again, as far I feel comfortable with Maryland ahead of them. I actually have Michigan State I have them last in the Big Ten East.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, we'll see how it goes. I definitely think that there are some question marks about Michigan State, and primarily probably both Michigan teams. The biggest question is, how did the pandemic affect those teams? Because it's entirely possible that we saw a much better Michigan team than what they showed, but they didn't handle the pandemic well. And we might have seen a better Michigan State team than they showed because they did handle the pandemic well. I mean, we are going to see a lot of things this year that are going to tell us, did we see what we thought we saw, or is what we saw related to how the team just handled a very odd situation for everyone? Because some teams handled it quite well, some teams didn't do very well at all.
Again, I'll give credit to Mel Tucker. I think that the way that he and his coaching staff handled the COVID situation, I think, again, like they were dealt a really difficult situation. I think they handled it much better than Jim Harbaugh. I think, just by and large. If anything, I think that it's just going to take some time. And, I think that Mel Tucker certainly is the right man for the job. And we'll just kind of see what kind of growth the Spartans have made in year 2 under his coaching.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we will find out this year. One of the things that I'm interested to see is, what is the offense going to look like? I think they were 122nd last year in offense. They didn't have good special teams, and with a bad offense and bad special teams, you got to go a long way down the field. And if you have a bad offense, well, it's really difficult to do that. So we'll see if they've improved in that area. We will see also if the defense can get back to being what a Michigan State defense is. And some of the things that I'm looking for this year is to see what kind of reverting to the mean are we going to see. Like, for example, Indiana's defense had a ton of interceptions last year. That's almost certainly going to fall off this year. So how does that affect their win-loss record, especially with a schedule like theirs? Some of those games last year that Indiana won, those turned on turnovers that they may not get this year. So I just like to play the averages out, and I think that's why I've got Indiana taking a step backward this year, and I think I've got Maryland taking a step backward this year, although maybe Mike Locksley is better than we think he is. I've got Maryland next and Rutgers last, and you've already tipped your hand that you have Michigan State last. That means you have Rutgers in 6th.
That is correct, by process of elimination. And you're right. I mean, because you kind of threw me for a curve with having Michigan State, at the number 5 spot. I never ever thought that Rutgers would be as competitive as they were last year. I mean, I think very highly of Greg Schiano. The evidence, speaks for itself. Like what he did during his first tour of duty as the Scarlet Knights head coach. He made, now granted it was in the Big East, which isn't in existence anymore, but he did have Rutgers as basically a top 10 program through, like the latter part of his career there. And then it all fell apart when he left. What he was able to do with, a lot of transfers, with, the players who did stick around, like he got them to play hard, pretty much every game. Like, the Ohio State game, what kind of the mere fact that Ohio State, there was never any doubt in my mind that Ohio State was going to win that game. What was very surprising is that in previous years under Chris Ash, that would be the kind of thing where like Ohio State would be rolling at the half, and then Rutgers would basically like, okay, let's just continue. Like let the beatings will continue until morale improves,
Yeah.
kind of a mindset. That I think last year it was like, okay, we're gonna pull out the bag of tricks and we're gonna do what we can, and we'll make it interesting. Put it that way. We're not gonna win this game, but we're gonna let you know that you were in a game. And I think just that psychological difference of what Greg Schiano and his coaching staff have been able to do, I think that he is so well respected throughout the state of New Jersey that, kind of almost like in a Jim Tressel mindset of, if he can keep the better players or a significant number of the better players in New Jersey at home to play for Rutgers, I think he can make Rutgers a bowl team sooner than I think anyone probably anticipated. I look at their schedule and they open up against Temple. They go on the road to the Carrier Dome against Syracuse. They play Delaware. They could be 3-0 and then go to the Big House to play against a Michigan team that as we talked about, like it went into overtime, that they might go in there with a lot of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like, I think Rutgers, they could be, when you think about the fact, like, okay, those first three games, they go to Illinois. We were just talking about Maryland. They've got Michigan State. They could be a bowl team in year two. I'm not saying they will, but I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I have Rutgers last for the for the reason that you just said, because of their schedule. First of all, yeah, I like what Greg Schiano brought to the mentality of his players. But what that also does is it's going to change the mentality of the players that they played against last year. So an Ohio State team that, they hung around with and were annoying throughout the game, that Ohio State team this year will not take their foot off the gas. That Michigan team that was lucky to escape with their lives from the Rutgers game, they're not going to take Rutgers lightly, and they get them at home. So after that Delaware game, Rutgers' schedule looks like this. With the exception of an Illinois game on the road, which I would say is a gimme, but it's for Rutgers it might not be. Here's what the rest of that schedule looks like from that third game on. At Michigan, home to Ohio State and Michigan State, at Northwestern. Then they got the Illinois game on the road. Then Wisconsin at home, at Indiana, at Penn State. That is a heck of a schedule for any team, let alone a team like Rutgers. I think Rutgers doesn't surprise anyone this year. I still think they improve. They play some close games, but I think that they're not quite there yet. And again, we've seen Greg Schiano dip into the transfer portal this offseason. He is going to start making a difference in the recruiting classes, but it's going to take a couple of years, I think, to stock the cupboards with enough goodies to where that team can look at that part of the schedule and not be going, whew, that's difficult.
I completely understand that. I think, just because teams are not going to take them lightly, I don't think, maybe it's just a difference of opinion between you and me. I don't think that Michigan game had anything to do with taking lightly. I think, quite frankly, I think Rutgers outplayed and outcoached them.
Well, I think it was partly that, and I think it was partly I think Rutgers handled the pandemic well, and I don't think Michigan did. So there'll be maybe some residual changes from that. But I also think that these kids, they're not going to want to. They heard it all year, and they've been hearing it for a year. They're not going to want to hear it anymore. They're going to try to go out with something to prove against Rutgers, and maybe they didn't take them lightly, but they're certainly not going to take them lightly this year.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. I just think I think Schiano, it's not necessarily, through smoke and mirrors. I think that these guys, when I see them play, they are just so they're like light. It's like night and day between what used to be on the field for Rutgers versus what we saw last year. And I think a full offseason that he didn't have. Again, I think still supplementing the talent with the transfer portal, getting the recruits in. I just think that, Rutgers, I have them 6, but when I look at that schedule, I think 3-0 is certainly a possibility. And I think that they can try and get to, I'm not saying that they will, but I think that the possibility of getting to that magic 6 number and getting a bowl berth is certainly within reach.
Okay. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree, but I have my doubts about year 2 for the Scarlet Knights. They're going to play hard. They're going to play, for Greg Schiano, the way the Greg Schiano teams play. They're going to be a hard-nosed team. They're going to be difficult, but there's still a talent gap. They have, I don't know, I just look at these games and I don't think, I don't feel as good about them at Syracuse as you do, for one thing. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, things are going to get better at Piscataway. I don't know that we're quite there yet, and I think that this is a season that maybe they, like I said, they could improve and still finish lower than they did last year. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But that, I believe, brings us to our final predictions in the Big Ten East. We both have Ohio State, Penn State. And whereas we only had one flip-flop of 2 teams in the West, we've got a little bit all over the board in the East for us. I've got Michigan 3rd, and then Indiana and Michigan State. You have Indiana, then Michigan, then Maryland, and then I have my final 2 as Maryland and Rutgers, and you have Rutgers and then Michigan State bringing up the bottom. So it's good that we have some disagreement because we had very little last week.
Well, I mean, and let's be honest. I think when it comes to the Big Ten West, considering Ohio State, obviously, like they play Big Ten West opponents. I mean, like they're opening up at Minnesota. They're gonna get Nebraska. They're gonna get Purdue. But by and large, when you're used to, seeing the Big Ten East, I think, again, I think this difference of opinion is actually a good thing because it's like, okay, we used the similar kind of logic and arguments against each other, like when it came to quarterback play, the schedule, like what we saw in terms of, like how COVID impacted all those kind of things. We just took them from different perspectives. So I think I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. One thing we didn't mention is the Rutgers quarterback battle. It will not involve Art Sitkowski this year. He has transferred to Illinois, which I thought all quarterbacks transferred to Northwestern. I thought that's how it worked.
Yeah, well, Art Sitkowski, I think he is the heir apparent to the never-ending tenure of Brandon Peters at Illinois. I mean, so again, like not, we were talking about in terms of the transfer portal. I was just giving compliment to Greg Schiano that, like he brought in a lot of talent last year that helped. By the same token, there are obviously players like an Art Sitkowski who felt they could flourish elsewhere. I mean, I think that if anything, the fact that he wants to go and be coached by Burt at Illinois, that might speak volumes about, kind of the offense that Burt is secretly plotting and hatching to unleash upon the Big Ten.
Yeah, Sitkowski though he's a man ball quarterback though. I don't think he's that mobile guy, but Noah Vedral is for Rutgers, but I don't know that have we heard who's won the battle there? Have we heard if it's Vedral or
Johnny Langan?
Yeah, Langan.
I think Vedral is the starter. So, I mean, it's one of these things where, for all of the criticism that Greg Schiano received, and let's be honest, he deserved during his tenure as Ohio State's defensive coordinator, like overly complex schemes that did not, the players were overthinking and just not, playing like when as soon as Jeff Hafley came in with basically like the same personnel, and all of a sudden the defense was markedly better. Then that kind of spoke to, okay, you overcomplicated and overthought this. But somehow when he's as the head coach, I think he takes the opposite approach, and okay, let's make this simple, and let's get the best players out there. And I think, we kind of saw glimpses of that last year.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll come back. That's the great thing is this is all being recorded. It's going to be out there for everyone to hear. So we'll come back at the end of the year and see how we did. We'll revisit our predictions. Maybe we'll revisit them during a bye week and see how we're kind of checking in on those and see how things are kind of unfolding. But I think really, honestly, I'm going to have a good idea by week 6 or so, which of us is going to be closer in the Big Ten East, because that's when sort of the meat of the schedule is going to hit for some of these teams, and some of the games that could sway where they finish relative to each other are going to be taking place in that sort of time frame in like weeks 5, 6, 7.
I agree. I mean, like I said, I can't wait. I mean, we've got college football this weekend we can talk about briefly, as it relates to the Big Ten West. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, it's like when you look at the way that the schedule lines up, not just for Ohio State, but for so many, teams, throughout the Big Ten, like you said, like that, middle portion, that week 6, if you want to think of it, I think we'll have a better understanding as to how it's progressing and how it may shake out in the final standings.
Indeed. Okay, why don't we talk about the week 0 slate, because it's like you said, it does impact the Big Ten. Nebraska plays at Illinois at 1 o'clock on Fox this Saturday, the 28th, and that's I think it's going to be interesting to see how Burt comes out. But I think we both anticipate Nebraska will win that game.
Yeah, you that would be accurate. I think psychologically, and this is just my opinion, I think Nebraska has invested a lot more psychologically into this than Illinois. That's not to say that Illinois doesn't care. That's not my implication. When you think back to last year with Nebraska, I mean, they were soundly beaten by Illinois at home, in the middle of the season. And again, like the Nebraska, there's, with the recent news about some, off season, I should say, internal investigations into the way Nebraska has been handling things with, some of their analysts and, all these kind of things. Like, I think they need this game more for their psychological well-being than Illinois. If Illinois does pull off the upset, and I'm referring to it as an upset simply because you and I are both predicting Nebraska to win, I think that could also, like, this is the kind of thing where, how does Nebraska respond? I just think Nebraska, I agree with you. I think that they are much better than they have been in previous years under Scott Frost. They certainly need this game, because, we talked about their schedule last week. They've got some really difficult games down the stretch, so they need to start the year on a positive note. So I'm gonna agree with you, and I think Nebraska wins this week 0 Big Ten game.
If Burt comes out of the box and wins at Illinois, does Scott Frost, should he just start packing his bags?
I'm not going to go so far as to start packing his bags, but I'm going to say that, I'm sure he and his new boss, Trev Alberts, might have some, not so necessarily friendly conversations, put it that way, even though they played for Tom Osborne. I think the pressure's on Nebraska. let's not make any mistake about that. I think, like Bert is coming in with a lot of fanfare. The fact that he's, doing from what I've heard, a much better job at recruiting the local Illinois talent than Lovie Smith ever did. He has everyone excited because of his previous success at Wisconsin. But yeah, the pressure's on Scott Frost. I mean, he was the guy who, quote unquote, got it. His predecessors did not. Like this was supposed to be a return to the glory years of Nebraska, and it hasn't materialized. So,
no.
Yeah, I think the pressure's squarely on Nebraska, but I think Nebraska will rise to the occasion.
All right. Well, if you don't like that 1 o'clock game, the 2 o'clock game is probably not going to be more to your liking. UConn at Fresno State. Then Hawaii is at UCLA at 3:30 Eastern, and I'm a little annoyed that I don't get to stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning watching Hawaii because they're on the mainland for this game against potentially future Big Ten opponent UCLA. Then we got a bunch of Western teams. We got UTEP at New Mexico State at 9:30, and Southern Utah at San Jose State at 10 p.m. on CBS Sportsnet. That is just a barn burner lineup. Football games.
I see. That's a thing. Like that's where you and we have another difference of opinion. Like the words "annoyed" at not being able to stay up. I had to really haltingly use that phrase. I mean that doesn't exist. Like I am never annoyed at the opportunity of getting quality sleep time. Especially I know like. How could you possibly turn down an opportunity to see UTEP play on Saturday night? But yeah, I think out of the remainder of those games that you just rattled off, the one that I might have a glancing interest in, just because I'm kind of curious to see in terms of how much improvement has been made, is definitely that UCLA Hawaii game. I think Chip Kelly. I don't want to say that he's under the gun, but I think we're starting to get into that. Okay, we need to see some more positive results. I think the patience is starting to wear thin out in UCLA.
I'll say it. He's under the gun.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and say it. I'm not afraid. I will take on all comers who are going to hate on me for saying that Chip Kelly has a lot to prove this year. But it starts at home against Hawaii, 3:30 Eastern time. We have no Pac-12 after dark games. You can't watch that UTEP at New Mexico State game, Chip, because it's not on TV as far as I can tell. Southern Utah at San Jose State is, and of course I'll have to stay up and watch that so I can find out all about Southern Utah.
You're legally obligated, I guess.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But Nebraska at Illinois is the game we're going to be watching, obviously, just to see some Ohio State opponents and and some Big Ten schools and see how they are going to go. But you and I are going to come back here next week and we're going to be in our game preview mode because after that Saturday week 0. Slate of barn burner games, we have, which I guess UCLA Hawaii is the marquee matchup. I guess we will only have 5 days before Ohio State travels to Minnesota, and that game is on Fox at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, TCF Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, and you and I will do our preview show. We'll see if we can get a guest on to talk a little bit about the Gophers and who won all the battles there and what they've got coming back and who are the newcomers and where their areas of concern are. So we'll see if we can find somebody to give us that kind of information. But it's exciting because, oh my gosh, we're here. We did it. We got through the off season and we only had to take 1 month off, Chip.
I know. We made it somehow.
Yeah.
Miraculously.
Exactly. All right, Chip, where can people find you on the internet?
I can be found on the internet at Chip Minnich. Last name is spelled Minich. And besides this podcast, I'm also a contributor to Athlon Sports, where you may find a couple articles recently submitted by me, looking at Ohio State's schedule, ranking the games in terms of degree of difficulty from least to most, as well as finding out from some other Athlon Sports authors. They predict, as I do, how Ohio State will do game by game this coming season.
All right, you can find me on Twitter as well. I'm at Mike36Fan. And I also write for Buckeye Scoop. I'm the grumpy old Buckeye, and I've not written anything all summer, but starting next Thursday night, I will be writing as the grumpy old Buckeye to tell you what bothered me about the Ohio State at Minnesota game. So there's that. Make sure you are subscribed to this here podcast. If you want to help us out and it costs you nothing, you can leave us a star rating on iTunes and leave us a nice little review. It helps us get seen by more people and rise up the rankings, which is always nice because I think there's a few Ohio State football podcasts, Chip.
Just a few.
Yeah.
Just a few.
There's about 37 of them just on Buckeye Scoop.
I know, and it's difficult to find time to listen to them all, but it's well worth the investment.
Yeah, it is, especially when one of those shows insists on having 17 shows a week.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's kind of difficult to come up with any kind of, scoops or, any kind of late breaking news because it's pretty much, already been reported as soon as it takes place.
Have Tom and Tony changed the name of their podcast yet to Buckeye Hourly?
That I'm not sure if that's been put in the company suggestion box.
Oh, do we know if Gerd is doing his normal predictions or who you're rooting for column for week 0? Do we know if he's doing that?
I haven't seen that. That's a good point.
I forget what he calls that. What does he call that?
I think it's like I think you're right. It's like who you should be rooting for,
or
something like that.
Yeah.
So
he's got a name for it, but I can't remember. Is it cheat sheet? Just like cheat sheet or something?
That might be
I don't know.
I think that cheat sheet. That sounds right.
Yeah, something sheet. I don't know. Yeah, I hope he does because I would love to see what he's got to say about UTEP at New Mexico State.
There you go. Find out.
All right. Well, that'll do it. We'll be back next week, Chip, to do a Buckeye preview for the Big Ten and season opener, Ohio State at Minnesota. It's hard to believe it's here, but it's upon us, and we better savor it because, as we say every year, at the end of the year, it's like, wow, it's gone already.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It'll fly by. So definitely try it, especially considering the nature of last year. I think we'll truly savor this season.
Mm-hmm. All right, everybody, thanks for listening to the Silver Bullets podcast. Like I mentioned, you can, if you leave us a star rating and a review, that'd be appreciated. Costs you nothing, takes seconds. Listen to all the other podcasts at Buckeye Scoop, the Buckeye Scoop Radio Network, as we said, Buckeye Weekly, the Sloopcast, Morning Scoop, Gives in the Bank, Scoop World Order, and on and on and on. Lots and lots of shows, something for everybody, many things for everybody, I think. And, of course, become an insider at BuckeyeScoop.com, and you will get practice reports. You're going to find out stuff that other people don't know, and what, like Chip said earlier, knowledge is power. And we want you to be more powerful, that's all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, that's it. We'll see you next week. We'll do the thing we always do at the end, Chip. Go Bucks!
Go Bucks!